It's Monday, 6:30 p.m. in the UK, and welcome to this fourth Mastering Life Shorts webinar. Today, we're going to be trying to find out how the ancient philosophy of Yin and Yang can link with modern day BDSM lifestyles. So, where did this all come from? So, I quite often get messages like this on my Twitter feed. Someone sent me this. I like dominating and humiliating stroke degrading. I just feel super guilty about that. Since I study medicine and it's against medical ethics, I feel not being in my place, and I guess it's super hard to deal with. Another one said, I have a question for the gay BDSM community. I'm a guy who's not very strong. Is it wrong that I fantasize about a bigger, stronger men being rough with me? But I also like the idea of a guy who's effeminate and meek being a real bullbuster. So you have these people who are struggling with the concept of what is right and what is wrong. And often it comes from an idea of this is how I should be, this is the way I should show myself. And I think what we can do by looking at the idea of yin and yang is to really separate this out into what is truly you and what we're missing sometimes. So let's go into this. So one of the really important concepts that yin and yang teaches us is that it's very difficult to tell things without seeing the opposite. So if you look at that egg, and I was to question you and say, how big is that egg? It's quite difficult to work out. You might be looking for other things in that picture to suggest that maybe the wooden slats, are they big or are they thin? Is the straw is the straw very thick or is it thin? It's difficult to tell how big that egg is. When I surround that egg with other eggs, you can see that yes, it was an ostrich egg and it was huge. Many times bigger than your average hen's egg. And this was something that was directly out of the Tao Te Ching, ancient Chinese philosophy. So this reads, therefore being and non-being give birth to each other. Difficult and easy accomplish each other. Long and short form each other. High and low distinguish each other. Sound and tone harmonize each other. Before and after follow each other as a sequence. The key here being that if you didn't know about high, you wouldn't know about low. And a lot of our lives we see as a one size thing, and we don't recognize the alternatives. So let's look at this guy. What do you see? You might see, you might look at this and think money. You might look at it and think success. You might think handsome. You might say, he's fit. All of these things. And the question is, where does balance come into this? Where does the sort of opposites come in? Well, you couldn't say he looks rich unless you knew what poverty looked like. You wouldn't know what successful looked like if you hadn't come across unsuccessful. Down to, you wouldn't know if he was good looking without knowing whether he was what ugly looked like. You wouldn't know whether he was thin without knowing if he was fat, or without knowing fatness. All of these things are there in the background in our minds. Now, one of the really important things about this is about gratefulness for what we already have. So it's very easy for us always to judge upwards. So I don't have as much money as the person next door, and we never look at how much we do have. So we sometimes need to use the sort of yin yang effect to realize how good we have things. I have. We're so easy to say, oh, I'm in terrible health when we've got a bit of a headache or something, but then we look at other people and they're doing far worse. And this leads us to being much more grateful for who we are. Now, the concept of success is an interesting one, in that we often look at success and then we move the goalposts, and I'll be talking about that in a few weeks' time. So we'll come back to that. But we need to learn to be more grateful for what we have. And sometimes we need to look at what we don't have. And that might be we don't have a negative thing in order for us to be more grounded and grateful. This next concept that comes from the Tao Te Ching, what's more important, the cup or the space inside it? So when you first think about this, well, you think, well, it's got to be the cup because I can fill it with stuff. But then you think, well, no, the space is the important thing, because otherwise, if it was a solid cup, I wouldn't be able to fill it. And then you think, but the space wouldn't mean anything without the cup. The point is that the two are completely interconnected. You need the negative space in order to also have the positive space, and vice versa. And this again comes straight from Chinese philosophy. Clay is molded into a vessel. It is the empty space that gives the function of the vessel. Doors and windows are chiseled out to make a room. It is the empty space in the room that gives it its function. Therefore, something substantial can be beneficial, while the emptiness of the void is what can be utilized. And this brings us directly to the Yin Yang symbol. So the Yin Yang symbol is this ancient form that developed over time, and it's worth having a look at the story of the Yin Yang symbol. And it was very much designed to get across the idea that two things were needed to create each other. So the white only exists because you have the black only exists because you have the white. Now, the list on the left-hand side, yin, if you look at that, a lot of those in our modern day society are seen as not as good as the ones on the right, yang. So dark and feminine, passive, empty, low, non-being, receptive, soft, wet. They all feel like things we shouldn't be striving for. However, without them, we wouldn't know light, we wouldn't know masculine, we wouldn't know aggressive, we wouldn't know fullness or height or being or prominent or hard or dry. We need them both. And this, even the Christian church has bought into this idea, and it's one of the major arguments for why there is sin and why there is suffering on earth. Is basically, if you didn't have them, you wouldn't know that you were healthy and you were happy, and you wouldn't know goodness. So this has followed through philosophies all the way through. And so when you start to think of that, you think to yourself, well, actually, you need both, and you need both in your life to become complete and to become balanced. Many people are forced into being one thing or another. So you get the person who feels forced to be the leader, who's really strong all the time. Well, where do they get the weakness in their life? Where do they get the ability to stand back and be quiet instead of loud? And if you don't have that balance, then you feel unbalanced in yourself. Now, this is then when we lead to BDSM. Because, for example, we have this stereotypical trope of the strong leader who then goes home and is dominated by his dominatrix at home. And it actually has some grounding, in fact, in that you need that balance in your life. If you're in control constantly at work, if you're always being aggressive and the one who's leading other people, sometimes it's nice to turn off the brain and to be led. I had one of my coaching clients who came to me, and he was trying to work out why he wanted to be put in chastity and how he could deal with that in a particular relationship where he his husband, I think it was not kinky, so wouldn't really appreciate his husband being put into chastity. So over time we realized that actually what was going on here was that my client, the guy who wanted to be put in chastity, was a complete control freak in most of his life, and actually wanted to find a place that was a controlled environment for being out of control. And he felt that allowing someone to have the keys to his genitalia would be a really great way of doing that. as it turned out, we decided, or he decided, that it was incompatible with his relationship. But knowing that that needs to be put in chastity actually was an expression of the fact that he was feeling unbalanced in his life. He's then gone forward, and we've been looking at ways that he can get control in his life instead of, or sorry, lose control in his life instead of always being in control. Now, this has really affected me in my life. So anyone who's read my book will know that in my 20s and 30s, I was very much a carer in my relationship. And I felt very unbalanced in that I was very, it was on the yin side, that passive side, and always caring and always being called on to help other people, and it felt very unbalanced in my life. And that's probably why I got involved in BDSM in the first place, in that I realized that I needed something that gave that balance, that was then aggressive and dominant and really going for things. So I started getting involved in this world, and I really found that balance. Now, that relationship ended for various reasons. It turns out that I really enjoy BDSM, but what I found is that I have much better balance in my life. So people will have seen me working with my slave in very aggressive, domineering ways, but actually we have a very caring, fun relationship outside the BDSM play that you might have seen. We do still have a dynamic with whatever we do, but we're far more balanced, and I don't need to be aggressive and dominant all the way through my life anymore. Now, how can you go forwards with this yourself? As always, I've put a worksheet up on my website, so you can download it from englishleathermaster.com/mastering-life-shorts. What it will do is it will go through your core values and then start to think about how you judge them. So are you judging them using opposites, or are you judging them using the way other people relate to you? How many of those things that people say, oh, you must be like this, force you in a different direction? So going back to myself, if people were to see me, crying at a soppy film, then does that take away from my status as a dominant male? Personally, I don't think it does, because it just shows another side of my balanced life. So this worksheet then looks into how you can get more balance in your life. As ever, these things can be quite difficult to work through on your own. And if you'd like to go further into this, then get in touch with me via my website, and we'll talk about how coaching could really help you to move forwards on this journey, probably in quicker time than if you were to try and do it on your own. Well, that's all for today, unless anyone has any questions. If so, then please put them in the chat box or the question box. Next week, we will be talking about dancing in the moment. What I mean by that is this idea of really playing in the moment to play off other people, so you really go forwards without actually knowing how things are going to end. And I'll unpick that next time. It's a really exciting sort of way of thinking about the world. Okay, so thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking to you next week.